Before we get started, this video is sponsored by Street Fighter Resurrection, a new live-action miniseries from Machinima and the team behind the acclaimed Street Fighter Assassin's Fist. It's available right now on the free mobile app Go90, so if you like Street Fighter, please go check out this new series by clicking the link in the description below. Some genres are built on the backs of giants, releases so monumental that future games couldn't help but look to their decisions for guidance. The platformer had Super Mario Bros., the first-person shooter had Doom, and fighting games had Street Fighter 2. However, believe it or not, Street Fighter 2 did not walk an easy path towards release, and what would become one of its most defining features wasn't even intended to be in the game in the first place. In 1987, Capcom released a small action arcade game titled Street Fighter that saw players taking control of a martial artist named Ryu and battling their way through a series of other fighters. This first game was bereft of features, with only 2 identical playable characters and a straightforward combat system. Additionally, the first run of Street Fighter cabinets featured large circular pads that players would actually have to punch in lieu of pressing buttons. An altogether odd control scheme that may have contributed to the title's underwhelming sales. Joe Morici, head of consumer games at Capcom USA, recalled that this version of Street Fighter had to come off the market because everybody was getting injured. A second version featuring a joystick and regular buttons was eventually released, but to incredibly poor sales. Despite these troubles, Capcom's sales division requested that a sequel to Street Fighter be put into development, but it walked a tumultuous path towards release. The designers wished to tweak the direction of the game and steered it more towards a side-scrolling beat-em-up. The title was originally shown to the public as Street Fighter 89, but feedback was mixed. Gamers liked the new idea, but believed it felt nothing like the original Street Fighter. As a result, Capcom spun the game off into its own original IP, titled Final Fight. This new franchise sold well, which prompted Capcom to push ahead with a true sequel to Street Fighter. But they encountered another problem. Takashi Nishiyama and Hiroshi Matsumoto, the backbone of the team behind the first game, had left Capcom to work with one of their rivals, SNK. New blood is going to be needed for this sequel, and fortunately for Capcom, they had no shortage of designers they could turn to. In 1988, the developer released a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up titled Forgotten Worlds. Created by a small team consisting of artist Akira Yasuda, producer Yoshiki Okamoto, and designers Akira Nishitani and Noritaka Funamizu. Forgotten Worlds had been a moderate success, so Capcom decided to put these developers in charge of their Street Fighter sequel. Ironically, this new group of designers had very little experience with the first Street Fighter. In particular, Nishitani had only played it once or twice. Remembering, why didn't I play Street Fighter? Because it wasn't a very good game. There was a drive amongst the 4 of them to take the base that had been built with Street Fighter 1 and turn it into something truly exceptional. Okamoto explained the basic idea was to revive Street Fighter, a good game concept, to make it into a better playing arcade game. Nishitani put it more bluntly, stating that he wanted to make a game so good it will make the original Street Fighter look like a knockoff. A team of between 35 and 40 people was assembled to work on Street Fighter 2, with more than half of them being artists splitting duties on character designs, faces, sprite work, and backgrounds, all working under the supervision of Yasuda. This title departed quite a bit from its predecessor, most obviously with its playable roster. Instead of just 2 mechanically identical characters, the release of Street Fighter 2 featured 8 playable brawlers. Ryu and Ken both returned from the original Street Fighter, while new faces included the sumo wrestler E Honda, the electrifying mutant Blanca, Guile, a special forces operative, Interpol officer Chun-Li, pro wrestler Zangief, and Yoga Master Dhalsim. In addition, Street Fighter 2 had 4 bosses: the boxer Balrog, a Spanish ninja named Vega, kickboxer Sagat, and criminal mastermind M. Bison. Each of these characters became playable in later re-releases of Street Fighter 2. The design team worked from the inception of each of these new characters to make them unique, and they wanted their personality to shine through in their every facet. They wanted how each character walked, jumped, and even took damage to reflect on them as people. Care was taken when conceiving of their special attacks and techniques, with the team taking their time to make each of them uniquely bold and interesting. All of the hard work paid off. Nishitani remembered, "We animated their footwork first and put that up on the cabinet screen for everyone to see. It was the first time seeing the entire team crowded around a monitor. This is the moment when most character designers are moved to tears." Capcom focused heavily on making the game look and feel fun, prioritizing appealing animation and game feel over balance. So much so that stats like defense values ended up having very little effect in the title's damage calculations. The quality of the character animation heavily benefited from the use of CPS hardware, which allowed for different characters to take up different amounts of memory. For example, Ryu's set took up just 8 megabytes of the memory, while Zangief's occupied 12. Street Fighter II used an unheard of 48 megabyte memory capacity, with the intention of clearly setting its visuals apart from previous games. Despite this, the designers used the entirety of the 48 megabytes, and even had to cut out a great deal of character intro animations to save space. Street Fighter II encountered numerous problems during its development, including poorly tuned difficulty settings, complicated controls, and a storm of bugs and glitches. The screen would often freeze, characters would suddenly move from one area to another, and computer-controlled opponents would often stop moving for no reason. Most of the problems in development were solved through rigorous playtesting. The team would often drag Capcom staff who hadn't yet played the game and force them to test it, just to continually get blind impressions on the title. Additionally, as the game neared completion, Akira Nishitani discovered that an error had been made in the title's official logo. Warrior had been misspelled with an E. He remembered, "Since the logo had already been created, I couldn't just go in and change the letter at this point. Maybe I can just force it to look like an O," I thought. I tried layering various sprites over it until it finally looked like an O. Phew. While all of these issues were eventually ironed out, another bug in the game ended up becoming one of its most iconic features: the combo system. It was decided early in Street Fighter II's development that the title shouldn't be as punishing on new players, and the team extended the amount of time players could use to attack their opponent. Programmer Motohide Ishiro explained, "As a side effect of giving people more time to enter their attack commands, players could perform combos. So if you were doing a crouching kick by holding down and then pressed right and punch when your character was doing that animation, you could connect those together. It wasn't intentional to let players combine moves into combos." Ironically, many of the developers believed that this system was something impossible to make useful inside a game, but left it in as a quote-unquote hidden feature. Designer Noritaka Funamizu pointed out that the most interesting thing is that this became the basis for future titles. Similar combo systems have ended up becoming an essential feature in almost all fighting games released since. The vast majority of the title's music was composed by Yoko Shimomura, who had previously worked on Final Fight but ironically had reservations about composing music for a fighting game. She later described her work on the title, stating, "When a project came around, Capcom usually looked for people in the sound department who were free at the moment, and I was free." Her style differed from other Capcom composers at the time, who used heavier sounds and tones. In comparison, Shimomura's music was much lighter and upbeat, a decision questioned by some in the company. Akira Nishitani, however, supported her direction, calling it fun and encouraged her to stay the course. Interestingly, Shimomura did not compose her music for specific characters or stages, and instead allowed the programmers to choose which theme went where. Street Fighter II's music would later be considered some of the most iconic in the fighting game community. Guile's theme in particular garnered a following on the internet, after users deduced that the track could be successfully paired with virtually anything and everything. Street Fighter II: The World Warrior was released in arcades on February 6, 1991, but the game didn't gain traction for several months. Capcom was concerned that they had another flop on its hands, but noticed that many people hadn't figured out that multiple players could fight against one another. The company campaigned in several magazines to inform players of the feature, which caused Street Fighter II to explode in popularity. The game sold over 200,000 cabinets worldwide and consumed more than 9.25 billion quarters, generating $2.3 billion in revenue. When accounting for inflation, that's over $4 billion in today's currency. Street Fighter II was ported to the Super Nintendo Entertainment System on June 10, 1992 in Japan, July 15, 1992 in North America, and December 17, 1992 in Europe, where it would be considered a system seller. It has since been remade for countless systems and had various alterations and re-releases like the Champion Edition, Turbo, Super, Super Turbo, Hyper, and HD Remix. Between all of its home console ports, Street Fighter II has sold a staggering 14.3 million units worldwide. Street Fighter II not only revived a brand that could have stagnated and died, but created a community for fans of fighting games unlike anything that had come before it. It and its re-releases have been pillars of competitive play for more than 25 years, and its sequels and spin-offs remain some of the most popular fighting games ever developed. Achievements made all the more impressive when considering that fresh faces and bold ideas were the only thing steering that ship ahead. Thanks for giving this little retrospective about Street Fighter II a watch. It was a lot of fun to make, and I learned a lot of really interesting things while researching for it. Seriously, I had no idea that this game's development was so troubled, or that some of those troubles ended up defining an entire genre. And hey, if you like Street Fighter and want some more, please check out Machinima's Street Fighter Resurrection over on Go90, a mobile app that you can get for free. The team behind it has done amazing work in the past with the Street Fighter Assassin's Fist series, and Resurrection looks like it's going to be great. So please, click the annotation on screen or the link in the description to check out Machinima's Street Fighter Resurrection over on Go90.